Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. Never are the rich benevolent. This Li clan really knew how to rake in the money. And all by climbing on the backs of the common people. Of course, it helped Bai Xiaochun's shakedown efforts to categorize the Li clan in this way. It was with complete righteous indignation that he stood off to the side, watching Zhou Yixing uprooting the rainbow spirit thistle. Glancing at the flower, he said, "Be careful with that flower. Don't damage it. Growing flowers is the only hobby I have, so although that flower doesn't belong to me, I simply can't stand to allow anyone else to harm it." Zhou Yixing looked a bit embarrassed. It would be obvious to anyone who looked at it that this flower was anything but ordinary. As he worked, he muttered to himself that it seemed too obvious that Bai Xiaochun was trying to avoid responsibility and have Zhou Yixing take the flower to his mansion for him. After Zhou Yixing dug up the rainbow spirit thistle, Bai Xiaochun pointed at the ground and, eyes glittering, said, "There's something really strange about this place. Yixing, let's go a bit deeper and see what we can see." In response, Zhou Yixing stomped his foot forcefully onto the ground, which caused the dirt to collapse and whoosh away, revealing something buried further down. A beast hide. It was impossible to say exactly what kind of beast it had come from. It was completely black, and seemingly ordinary in nature. It did not emanate spiritual energy, and seemed almost like an ordinary animal skin. However, as soon as it appeared, Bai Xiaochun could sense his eternal parasol inside of his bag of holding suddenly getting excited. Back in Burrow 89, the eternal parasol had helped Bai Xiaochun defend against the diva-level attack of Chen Haosong. However, the parasol's canopy had ended up being destroyed, leaving behind only the damaged main shaft. The fact that the base of the parasol was now vibrating caused Bai Xiaochun's eyes to widen. He quickly sent some divine sense into his bag of holding, which enabled him to sense that the parasol had suddenly begun to thrum with desire. Clearly, it wanted that beast hide. Not having noticed Bai Xiaochun's reaction, Zhou Yixing said, "It's just a beast hide." Curious, he picked up to look at it, but didn't see anything unusual about it. He looked over at Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun rubbed his eyes, immediately causing them to redden and tear up. Looking at the hide, he sighed and said, "That animal skin makes me think back to my childhood and my constant companion Blackie. Whatever. Hand it over to me. I'll keep it as a remembrance. I doubt the Grand Heaven Master will object to me keeping an ordinary beast hide." Sighing and shaking his head, he accepted the beast hide from Zhou Yixing. After feeling it in his hands, he placed it into his bag of holding, a look of reminiscence and grief on his face. Then, he turned to leave. Zhou Yixing looked suspiciously at him as he left. Smiling wryly, he shook his head and continued on with the shakedown. Before long, the Li clan had been completely cleaned out. The hearts of the members of the Li clan dripped with proverbial blood, and that was especially true of Li Tiansheng. He could do nothing but watch as case after case of wealth was hauled away. Despite the pain he felt, there was nothing he could do about the situation. At the moment, his desire to survive outweighed everything, and he was sure that if he did the slightest thing to irritate Bai Xiaochun, he would likely have his life force drained away again. The entire time, he actually kept a smile plastered on his face, although it was the type of stiff smile that looked worse than someone crying. After the Li clan had been cleaned out, Bai Xiaochun looked over at Li Tiansheng, and couldn't help but feel a bit of admiration. Quite a bit of willpower, I see, he thought. He actually smiled during the entire shakedown. It seems Li Tiansheng is able to deal with difficult situations better than the average person. All of a sudden, he felt more vigilant than before, and quickly made a decision to make advance preparations to forestall any future problems. "Men, arrest them all and throw them into Grand Asylum. And tell the warden that this Li Tiansheng has unusual willpower, and should be given a particularly severe sentence." With that, he ignored the secretly fuming Li Tiansheng, and led the larger portion of his corpse trooper blood battalion up into the air. Next target, the Chen clan. There's not much time left, I definitely need to hurry. With that, he pressed forward at top speed toward the location of his next shakedown, which was the Chen clan in Burrow 13. Everyone who had been present to watch him and the corpse troopers shake down the Li clan were shocked, and even trembling. The fact that the mighty Li clan had met such a fate was no small matter in Arch-Emperor City. Clearly, the Grand Heaven Master was wielding a sharp knife to instigate major changes in the city. As people analyzed the matter and spread word, the various nobility and aristocracy in the city were all informed. Even the 4 heavenly kings learned about the matter. Everyone was shocked to the core, and many eyes came to focus on Bai Xiaochun to see what he would do next. As Bai Xiaochun proceeded along toward the Chen clan, his thoughts were focused on his bag of holding and the eternal parasol, which was now experiencing a dramatic transformation. That seemingly ordinary beast hide was obviously something that had to do with the growth of the rainbow spirit thistle. After Bai Xiaochun had put it into his bag of holding, an enigmatic, half-laughing, half-crying ghost face had appeared on the surface of the damaged parasol shaft. Then, it greedily absorbed the beast hide, fusing with it as one. As it did, the beast hide became the new canopy of the parasol. Furthermore, an aura began to emanate from the parasol that got Bai Xiaochun very excited. It was apparently refining itself and growing more powerful. Bai Xiaochun couldn't have been more excited. After all, the eternal parasol had been of great help when it came to cultivating his undying bones. He had been worrying about how to fix the damage to the eternal parasol, but now, it was fixing itself, and even becoming stronger in the process. As of this point, Bai Xiaochun was convinced that the shakedowns were already worth it. The Li clan has helped me get my eternal parasol back. I wonder, what surprises do the Chen clan have in store? Excited, he retracted his divine sense from his bag of holding and pushed toward burrow 13 with greater speed. Many people were paying attention to his progress, and soon, it was to their shock that they realized that burrows 12, 13, and 14 all had heavenly marquises in them. Considering what had happened to Heavenly Marquis Li, they could only imagine was to come. Who is he going for this time? Damn it, I didn't offend Bai Hao, nor the Grand Heaven Master. When Bai Xiaochun passed by burrow 12 in grand fashion, the Heavenly Marquis there breathed a sigh of relief. However, the Chen clan in burrow 13 was beginning to get nervous. Then, he came to a stop in the air just outside of their clan. Heavenly Marquis Chen, come out to see me immediately. The Heavenly Marquis from burrow 14 was immediately a bit relieved. Meanwhile, Heavenly Marquis Chen sat in the top of his Heavenly Marquis pagoda, gripped with foreboding. Glaring at Bai Xiaochun, he shivered in anxiety. The best thing to do is get out of here as soon as possible. Without the slightest hesitation, he crushed a jade slip, which caused his body to immediately begin to fade away. Everyone in the Chen clan was scared witless, including that chosen who had accompanied Zhou Hong in his efforts to spread rumors about Chen Manyao and Shushan. By now, everyone had gotten some news about the fate of Li Tiansheng, and therefore, the fact that Bai Xiaochun had come here was terrifying beyond measure. Silence reigned in the Chen clan, with the exception of the nervous panting of the clan members. Countless eyes were fixed on Bai Xiaochun, hovering there in the air surrounded by black-armored corpse troopers. His hands were clasped behind his back, and his chin stuck up proudly, impressed by his own grandeur. However, after waiting for a moment and not seeing Heavenly Marquis Chen, he waved his hand to his men and said, "So, he has the audacity to despise the majesty of the Grand Heaven Master? Shake down this Chen clan. If anyone resists, execute them on the spot." Malevolent auras sprang up from the corpse troopers as they flew into the Chen clan. As for the two diva-level corpse troopers, Bai Xiaochun kept them by his side as bodyguards. Zhou Yixing was at Bai Xiaochun's side, and when he saw how powerful and amazing Bai Xiaochun was, he was once again convinced that he had made the right decision. As the corpse trooper blood battalion began to invade the Chen clan, the power of teleportation suddenly sprang up from pagoda in the middle of the clan. However, as it did, a cold harumph also filled the air. Where do you think you're going? That familiar black-robed figure once again appeared. Ignoring the Heavenly Marquis pagoda, he strode off into the distance, then reached out into thin air. Instantly, the air distorted, and an image appeared of Heavenly Marquis Chen, who was obviously attempting to flee the clan. When the clan members saw that their own Heavenly Marquis was trying to escape, it struck dread into their hearts, and left them feeling crushed. They had absolutely no will to fight, and simply watched as the corpse troopers entered and began to ransack the clan. The Chen clan was actually a lot wealthier than the Li clan. Even Bai Xiaochun, with his extensive experience performing shakedowns, was left gasping at the sight of all the wealth. However, just as he was approaching to take a closer look, a howl of delight erupted from further in the clan in an area where the corpse troopers had just taken control. "I knew you would get what you deserved eventually, Chen clan. Even if I die here this day, I, Song Ke, can close my eyes in death, content that you've earned your fate." The words were spoken with lively passion, as though the person behind them truly did not fear death. They were also alive with hatred, as if they had been spoken by a person who had suffered indescribable torments at the hand of the Chen clan, pain the likes of which could never be forgotten. No one in the Chen clan paid any attention to the words, though. All of them were staring nervously at Bai Xiaochun, their faces ashen and grim. Not even the black armored corpse troopers showed any interest. However, as soon as Bai Xiaochun heard the words spoken, and especially the name Song Ke, his eyes went wide, and a strange expression appeared on his face. He seemed amused, incredulous, and happily surprised, all at the same time. Song Ke, he murmured. Then he cleared his throat and intentionally cleared his face of all expression as he turned to look in the direction of the rear courtyard. Clasping his hands behind his back, he stuck his chin up and loudly said, "Whoever it is that's yelling over there, bring him to me." In response, one of the corpse troopers sped out from the rear courtyard and tossed a person onto the ground in front of Bai Xiaochun. Then he stood there, murderous aura seething, clearly ready to kill the person he had just thrown onto the ground if Bai Xiaochun gave the word. The person the corpse trooper had brought from the rear courtyard was not a soul cultivator, but an ordinary cultivator from the Heavenspan River region. At a single glance, it was possible to tell that he should have looked like a healthy young man. Instead, he was bedraggled and broken down, hardly more than skin and bones. He also had a scraggly beard that made him look much older than he actually was. His clothing was ripped and torn, making him look worse than a beggar. He was covered with what appeared to be soot and ash, and even had wisps of black smoke rising from his dantian region. He was clearly weak beyond measure, hovering right on the brink of death. And yet, despite that, his cultivation-based fluctuations revealed him to be, in the early nascent soul stage. The black wisps of smoke coming from his dantian region also spread out to cover his nascent soul. Furthermore, with every rotation of his cultivation base, spiritual energy would seep out through the black smoke. As soon as Bai Xiaochun saw all of this, he gasped in shock. This cultivator was none other than Song Ke. He had been a chosen in the Bloodstream sect, and one of the elites of the river-defying sect. He had traveled with Bai Xiaochun to the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect as a Dao protector, and had also gone into the labyrinth outside the Great Wall. From there, he had been teleported out into the wildlands just like Bai Xiaochun, Master God Diviner, Zhao Long, and many others. Some of the lucky ones who were teleported out into the wildlands had managed to make their way back to the Great Wall, but Song Ke hadn't been so fortunate. He had been teleported right into Arch-Emperor City. Unlike Bai Xiaochun, he had not become famous and popular, but rather, had been captured and enslaved, sold into service to the Chen clan. Because of his extraordinary cultivation base and natural talents, the Chen clan had used a brutal secret magic to forcibly propel his cultivation base all the way into the early nascent soul stage. Although it could be considered a breakthrough, it was actually very harmful to Song Ke, and had involved incredible pain and danger. And yet, that wasn't even of any importance. The worst thing of all was that he had been turned into something like livestock. The black smoke which had been inserted into him forced his cultivation base to rotate, and then sucked away the spiritual power from inside of him. In the end, he had become a living spirit stone used by the younger soul cultivators in the Chen clan to further their cultivation. In addition, the effects of his cultivation base were limited by the black smoke, and could not be used externally. They had also placed numerous restrictive spells on him. As such, he was no threat at all to anyone around him, and also lived in constant pain. Furthermore, in order to force his cultivation base to rotate more rapidly, and release more spiritual power, the younger members of the Chen clan had frequently tortured him. The torture had pushed Song Ke to the point where he wished to die, and yet, there was no way the Chen clan would allow a living spirit stone like him to perish. As the years passed, Song Ke gradually slipped into mental darkness. Therefore, when he saw how terrified the Chen clan cultivators were of these black-armored corpse troopers, he felt more joy than he had in years, and even threw his head back to laugh at the top of his lungs. As soon as he was thrown down onto the ground in front of Bai Xiaochun, he looked around at the terrified Chen clan cultivators, many of whom he recognized. As for the corpse troopers, their auras were enough to cause his mind to reel from shock. And yet, even more of note than those things, was the fact that everyone was clearly focusing solely on Bai Xiaochun. The person Song Ke saw standing in front of him was a handsome young man wearing luxurious clothing. He was clearly an elite of some sort, someone with an incredibly high standing. In fact, his bodyguard was a black-armored corpse trooper whose aura left Song Ke feeling completely stunned. He seemed as if he existed as one with the heavens, and made him feel so weak in comparison that a single thought on his part could surely end his life. Diva Realm. This guy has diva bodyguards? Who is he? Song Ke felt incredible pressure weighing down on him from this unknown young man, a person who struck terror into the hearts of the cultivators of the mighty Chen clan, and who had a diva as his bodyguard. He was obviously someone very important. There can't be very many people like this guy in the wildlands. And he's so young. Is he an imperial prince? Considering how long Song Ke had been living in Arch-Emperor City, he had come to know a bit about how the wildlands worked. As he looked up at Bai Xiaochun, his chest heaving, his heart suddenly filled with bitterness. As for Bai Xiaochun, he looked down at Song Ke and sighed, wondering what exactly Song Q's problem was. It seemed like every time they ran into each other, Song Ke was always in a really bad situation. Perhaps there was something wrong with him mentally? Although Bai Xiaochun was initially inclined to poke fun at Song Ke, such thoughts quickly vanished as various memories rose up in him, leading to feelings of pity. However, he couldn't poke any holes in his identity, so he quickly suppressed such thoughts, waved his hand, and said, "This living spirit stone doesn't seem half bad. Send him to my residence for use in my cultivation." Zhou Yixing immediately hesitated, and almost seemed like he wanted to say something, but before he could, Bai Xiaochun gave him a meaningful glare. It was a look that caused Zhou Yixing to tremble. He immediately voiced his assent, and stepped forward to grab Song Ke. However, before he could, Song Ke suddenly went crazy. "If you people are really that tough, then just kill me. I'd rather die than exist as a living spirit stone." His raving didn't cause Zhou Yixing to pause for even a moment as he hurried forward. Before he could lay hands on him, though, Song Ke turned his bloodshot eyes onto Bai Xiaochun and shouted, My uncle, he's Bai Xiaochun. He's in first place on the Hell Emperor Steel. If he becomes a diva, then he'll be the new Hell Emperor. If you dare to do anything to me, then my uncle will get revenge for me. None of you will be able to escape." Song Ke was feeling desperate, but had no other way to threaten someone with diva-level power. Not able to bear the thought of being a human spirit stone, he decided that he had to call on the name of Bai Xiaochun. As for the matter of Bai Xiaochun's name being on the Hell Emperor Steel, it was something he had heard the younger members of the Chen clan talking about recently, and was something that left him with very mixed emotions. As soon as the words left Song Q's mouth, Zhou Yixing's hands began to tremble. As for the surrounding Chen clan cultivators, many of them gasped and looked over at Song Ke. This was something that Song Ke had never mentioned before. If he had, they would surely have extracted more use out of him. After all, the name of Bai Xiaochun was attained on all of the wildlands. The fact that he was in first place on the Hell Emperor Steel was something that defied imagination. If it remained there until the end of the trial, and Bai Xiaochun actually became the successor of the Hell Emperor, it would be a clear slap in the face to the entire Arch-Emperor dynasty. As Song Q's words echoed out, the expression on Bai Xiaochun's face turned even more strange. The truth was that he was feeling very pleased with the whole situation, and was even thinking about how angry Song Ke had been in the past when he called him Care. Now, with the prospect of being a living spirit stone, he actually went so far as to call on his name. Silly boy, he thought to himself. Even if I weren't your uncle, I would still save you for the sake of the river-defying sect. And besides, considering everything that's gone on between your aunt and I. Sighing, Bai Xiaochun looked at Song Ke and had to resist the urge to walk over and touzle his hair. "Take him away," Bai Xiaochun said, flicking his sleeve. In his opinion, his gains here in the Chen clan had been significant. Song Ke let out an angry, agonized shriek as Zhou Yixing gritted his teeth and rendered him unconscious. As he carried him away, he stewed anxiously about the unexpected fact that Song Ke was actually connected to Bai Xiaochun. The entire time, Song Ke did not realize that the almighty government official he was speaking to was the very uncle he had just referred to. If he ever found out the truth one day, he would likely vomit buckets of blood and would be filled with unending regret over what he had just said. But Bai Xiaochun was very used to operating undercover, and had a mask that made accidental slip-ups in his disguise virtually impossible. As Song Ke was taken away, Bai Xiaochun looked around at the Chen clan, sighing in his heart. Who would have thought that I would actually run into Care here? He really does get himself into the worst situations. How did he end up as a living spirit stone? Clasping his hands behind his back, he stuck his chin up and looked around at the main square of the Chen clan which stretched out around him, sighing even more deeply. Bai Xiaochun was really starting to think of Song Ke as one of his lucky stars. Every time he ran into him, he would save Song Ke from an abyss of suffering. Whether it was in Sky City, on the Great Wall, or here, he was always able to get Song Ke to call him uncle. Don't tell me that it's just because of how outstanding I am, is it? Sighing, he continued to relish the pleasure of shaking down the Chen clan. Before long, all of the wealth of the Chen clan's reserve savings had been gathered up by the corpse troopers, and piled into a small mountain in the middle of the square. As for the cultivators of the Chen clan, they stood there trembling and not daring to say even a single word. After all of the wealth was extracted, and the clan had been swept through thoroughly to make sure it was safe, Bai Xiaochun finally strutted inside to do his own inspection, and make sure nothing had been missed. Escorted by his quasi-diva realm corpse trooper bodyguard, he went here and there within the sprawling clan estates, occasionally making observations. There's something strange about that ornamental rock formation. Blast it open. I'd put money on the fact that there's a secret chamber inside. Look at the pearls inlaid into the eaves of that building. They're obviously spirit pearls. Pry them out and take them away. There's something odd about the ground here. Men, come dig this area up and see if there is any treasure hidden underground. If so, take it. If not, then we'll make do with the limestone slabs. As he walked along, the surrounding corpse troopers obeyed his every word. The Chen clan cultivators were all very jumpy, and could tell that Bai Xiaochun was clearly going to clean them out completely. Unfortunately for them, there was nothing they could do except bow their heads and accept the fact that the Chen clan was finished. Rumbling sounds filled the clan as Bai Xiaochun went here and there performing his final inspection. When he was fairly satisfied, and was even preparing to leave, his expression suddenly flickered. His divine sense was currently far beyond the nascent soul stage, and was actually comparable to a diva's. Therefore, his final scan of the clan revealed that some distance away, there was actually a subterranean cavern. It was rather large, fully 3,000 meters from one side to the other. It was locked with numerous restrictive spells, and various other defenses that made it seem almost like an enormous chamber of holding. In fact, his divine sense was actually incapable of penetrating inside. He murmured, eyes glittering. The truth was that he was still hoping to find something in the Chen clan that would be of personal use to him, just as he had in the Li clan. Flying over to the area, he pointed down and excitedly said, "Dig that area up." Instantly, corpse troopers flew over and got to work. As the rumbling sounds echoed out, many of the Chen clan cultivators' faces drained of blood. They knew that, deep within that pit was hidden, not a magical item, but rather, the foundation of the Chen clan's ability to sell life force. Under normal circumstances, if anyone had dared to touch that area, they would have attacked with deadly force. But now, they could only watch silently as the buildings covering it were leveled. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of soul cultivators had gathered in the area to watch this unprecedented, momentous event playing out. 2 heavenly marquises had fallen, an event which was shaking all of Arch-Emperor City, and prompted more and more people to come and witness the matter personally. As the buildings in the rear of the Chen clan collapsed, the ground beneath was eventually revealed, which then began to crack and split under the force of the magical techniques and divine abilities of the corpse troopers. Eventually, the lid of the chamber of holding was out in the open, and then it was removed, revealing the pit beneath. Immediately, a vile, indescribable odor was released, an odor so noxious that it made many people involuntarily vomit. Frowning, Bai Xiaochun waved his hand in front of him to clear the air, and then peered inside the pit. As he did, a tremor ran through him, and he let out a yelp of surprise. He almost couldn't believe what he was seeing. It caused his mind to spin, and made his eyes completely bloodshot. At the same time, everyone else who could see the pit all began to cry out in shock. That's heavens. So, this is the secret of the Chen clan. So that's how the Chen clan is able to sell life force. The 3,000-meter wide pit was filled with what appeared to be 10,000 people. It was actually a pit of foul, necrotic water, within which could be seen so many corpses that 10,000 was probably too small of a number to describe them. Some of the corpses were completely decomposed. Others were only partially decomposed, and there were some living people. The clothing visible was not the clothing of wildlanders. Bai Xiaochun could immediately tell that these were heavenspan cultivators. They were skinny and emaciated, their expressions listless, as though they lacked souls. Black strands of smoke wriggled and writhed beneath their skin, constantly extracting their life force. Obviously, these were cultivators who had been captured and then viciously soul-searched. Because of the force of the soul search, their souls had been destroyed, leaving behind only their physical bodies. After undergoing some special treatment, they were then thrown into this pit and sealed up, whereupon their life force was slowly extracted. After they were sucked away into nothing more than dried-up corpses, however, their agony was not yet over. The foul liquid that resulted would be filtered and turned into the primary medicinal ingredient that the Chen clan used to refine life force. Although the wildlanders who saw the pit were shocked, they were not as deeply affected as Bai Xiaochun. He was not a wildlander, he was an ordinary cultivator from the Heavenspan River region, and therefore, he immediately began to tremble and sink into a very grim mood. After a moment passed, he even closed his eyes, worried that he might not be able to control his emotions. After a long moment passed, he opened his eyes and sighed. The war between the wildlands and the Heavenspan River region was not something that he could change. After all, the conflict he had solved between the spirit and bloodstream sects had been between two forces that were fundamentally on the same side. Without saying a word, he clenched his hand into a fist. Drawing upon his cultivation base and the full power of his fleshly body, he then unleashed a fist strike onto the pit. Everything trembled as a massive force slammed into the corpses in the pit, instantly transforming them into flying ash. As for the people who were technically alive, for all intents and purposes, they were already dead. Only their physical bodies lived on. For them, Bai Xiaochun's fist strike was actually something of a release. Although he couldn't be sure, he thought that some of those living bodies actually smiled in the moment before they faded away into nothing. Expression grim, he flicked his sleeve and coldly said, "Arrest all members of the Chen clan and send them to the Grand Asylum." The corpse troopers immediately went to work, and the Chen clan cultivators did nothing to resist. Bai Xiaochun was in a very grim mood. Although he had collected a lot of wealth from the Li and Chen clans, he didn't feel very much like he had exacted personal revenge, mostly because of the matter of the huge pit. He stood there for a long moment, wrapped up in his thoughts. Then he sighed, and turned and left with his corpse troopers. There was nothing he could do to change the overall situation. Furthermore, he knew that if he did anything to reveal his true identity, he might end up just like the people in that pit. After all, he wasn't in the river-defying sect right now. He was in the wildlands, in Arch-Emperor City. Now that he had handled the Li and Chen clans, it was in his role as the inspections commissioner that he went to the Imperial Palace to see the Grand Heaven Master and provide an official debriefing. Along the way, he struggled with his bad mood and kept thinking about that pit. When he arrived at the palace, he took a deep breath and pushed all of his gloomy thoughts into the bottom of his heart. I need to focus on my flame conjuring. Once I make that cultivation base breakthrough, I can leave this place. At the moment, he really missed home. When Bai Xiaochun arrived outside of Heaven Master Hall in the Imperial Palace, he immediately noticed that it was not devoid of people like it had been in the past. There were several dozen cultivators present who had come to offer formal greetings to the Grand Heaven Master. One of them was Chen Haosong, along with the old man who Bai Xiaochun had seen with him earlier. Those two were heavenly dukes, and there were 3 other heavenly dukes present. Although Bai Xiaochun didn't recognize them, he could tell from their auras that they were devas. 1. The rest of the people present were all heavenly marquises. 4 of them Bai Xiaochun recognized as people from the group of 9 who had besieged him. All of them had unsightly expressions on their faces as they waited for the Grand Heaven Master to summon them for their audience. As soon as Bai Xiaochun arrived, all of their gazes came to rest on him. "Bai Hao." Many of them growled through gritted teeth. Chen Haosong's eyes glittered especially coldly, and he clearly desired to kill Bai Xiaochun. After all, he was close to the heavenly Marquis Li, and at the moment, it was unclear whether the man was alive or dead. All of the nobility and aristocracy in Arch-Emperor City had been shaken by the fact that 2 heavenly marquises had been arrested by the Grand Heaven Master. After inquiries were made, and it became clear that Bai Xiaochun was behind it all, their hatred for him grew, although they didn't dare to do anything about it directly. When the gazes of 5 devas, and a whole group of half-devas, all came to rest on Bai Xiaochun, it made it feel as if countless mountains were weighing down on top of him. The coldness of the gazes caused Bai Xiaochun's mood to sink even lower, and at the same time, he started to get nervous. "I can't believe how badly these people want to kill me. They don't dare look at the Grand Heaven Master this way, but they have no qualms when it comes to me. They're clearly bullying me because they have superior cultivation bases." Heart shivering with fear, he looked back at the group. It was at this point that Chen Haosong spoke. "How dare you hoodwink the Grand Heaven Master, Bai Hao? If you have proof that heavenly marquises Li and Chen are traitors, then hand it over immediately for me to see." His words were accompanied by an explosive killing intent, and a dangerously incisive gaze that made it clear that he would cut Bai Xiaochun down in cold blood if he could. Bai Xiaochun's expression flickered as he struggled to deal with the pressure crushing down onto him. The energy rolling off of Chen Haosong was like a mountain slamming into him. Ears ringing, he took a few steps back, his face turning pale in the process, and even his cultivation base teetering unstably. All of a sudden, an intense sensation of deadly crisis rose up inside of him, causing his heart to tremble. However, that was also when a glint of hatred appeared in his eyes as he thought back to the tragic scene of that pit filled with 10,000 corpses. Instead of trying to stabilize his cultivation base, he actually bit his tongue as he staggered backward, and then sent the resulting blood spraying out of his mouth. "What gall you have, Heavenly Duke Chen," he shouted. "Are you trying to kill the inspections commissioner right in front of Heaven Master Hall? Don't tell me you're planning to mutiny right here and now." A mere thought on his part reached out to the Corpse Trooper Blood Battalion, causing numerous Corpse Troopers to fly over with killing auras surging. Another cold flash of light passed through Chen Haosong's eyes, but he knew how to hold his tongue when necessary. Although he had put some cultivation-based power into his words moments ago, he had only hoped to intimidate Bai Xiaochun a bit, not hurt him. Of course, the only reason he had held back from intentionally hurting him was because they were all standing right outside of Heaven Master Hall. Never could he have imagined that Bai Xiaochun would actually accuse him of something he hadn't done. And on top of that, he used it as an excuse to summon the Corpse Trooper Blood Battalion. Chen Haosong frowned, as did the other 4 heavenly dukes at his side. A light of madness sprang up in Bai Xiaochun's eyes. He was convinced that these people wouldn't dare to kill him here. After all, what would have been the point in the Grand Heaven Master using him to issue a warning, if he then simply allowed people to kill him? Either way, Bai Xiaochun was not worried about actually facing a threat to his life right here. He was still in a foul mood, and felt like venting a bit, so therefore, he decided he might as well perform a bit of a test. "I dare you to try that again, Heavenly Duke Chen," he shouted. At the same time, the murderous aura roiling off of his 1,000 corpse troopers grew even more intense. All of their gazes were focused directly on Chen Haosong, as if they would attack him at the slightest provocation. "You wouldn't dare," Chen Haosong said, his expression flickering as he yet again realized how devious Bai Xiaochun was. "I wouldn't dare? There's nothing I won't dare to do. I smacked the giant ghost king across the side of the head. I kidnapped more than 100 people in the necromancer kettle. I personally fought hundreds of chosen simultaneously in Burrow 89. So, tell me again what it is that I don't dare to do. Make one more move, and you'll see for yourself." "Are you threatening me?" Chen Haosong said through narrowed eyes that burned with killing intent. At this point, Bai Xiaochun decided to completely throw caution to the wind. Rage surging, he looked at the rest of the people who had gathered, and angrily shouted, "And if any of the rest of you dare to make a move, then I won't let it drop. Fudge. If I can threaten a heavenly duke, then what makes you think I'm scared of some heavenly marquises? You people listen to me. From here on out, you'd best be careful around me. As the inspections commissioner, I'm going to be keeping my eye on all of you." Although the heavenly marquises simmered with rage, when they saw that Chen Haosong was simply holding his ground and didn't dare to move, then they obviously had no choice but to simply glare angrily at Bai Xiaochun. Of course, Bai Xiaochun wasn't scared at all when it came to people simply staring at him, and looked back at them unflinchingly. Chen Haosong's expression grew more unsightly, and even as he seemed to be on the verge of losing control of his anger, someone cleared their throat inside of Heaven Master Hall. Then, the doors slowly opened, and the Grand Heaven Master strolled out. "How can we maintain a united front with all of this squabbling?" he said in a hoarse voice. Everyone, including Chen Haosong, turned, clasped hands and bowed. "Greetings, Grand Heaven Master." As he stood there in front of Heaven Master Hall, the Grand Heaven Master seemed a bit stooped. He looked old, and not very threatening at all, and yet, everyone gazed at him with terror lurking in the depths of their eyes. "Presumably you've come here in such a large group because you have something important to discuss. Am I right?" Sounding very respectful, Chen Haosong said, "Grand Heaven Master, we will take your words of counsel to heart. The reason Junior has come here today is to report that things are not going well in the fighting at the Western Great Wall. I would like to request the use of one of the secret treasures, the Heavenspan Thorn." The other heavenly dukes went on in similar fashion, reporting which tribes were having problems, or what precious treasures had appeared. Some offered news from the Heavenspan River region. Most of the heavenly marquises followed suit. They reported about random things that didn't have anything to do at all with Heavenly Marquis Li or Chen. Although Bai Xiaochun learned a bit more about the situation in the outside world from listening to their reports, he knew that all of these people were wily old foxes, and didn't really need to state their true goal outright. All of them coming here today in unison was enough to send a very clear message. Furthermore, it didn't make it seem like they were loyal to the Arch-Emperor. The position of Inspections Commissioner had been left vacant for many years, but now that it was filled, 2 heavenly marquises had been apprehended almost immediately. That was enough to get all of the nobility and aristocracy jittery, and it was only normal that they would try to get some more clarification about the situation. However, not everyone seemed to be willing to let things go at that. One of the heavenly marquises seemed to be slower on the uptake than everyone else, and after everyone else had given their reports, said, "Grand Heaven Master, about Heavenly Marquis Li." In response, everyone else looked over at him in shock, and many of them even began to sweat nervously. As for the Grand Heaven Master, he turned toward the person who had just spoken, a dark look in his eye. "Speak up," he said slowly. "I couldn't quite hear that." Louder," the Grand Heaven Master repeated. Sweat began to pour down the heavenly marquise's face. Trembling, he blurted, "Your humble servant has no questions to ask." The Grand Heaven Master nodded, and then looked around at the group silently. After a few painful moments ticked by, Chen Haosong took his leave, and then one by one, the rest of the group left. At that point, only Bai Xiaochun and the Grand Heaven Master were left outside of Heaven Master Hall. Bai Xiaochun blinked a few times. The scene which had played out just now was something the likes of which he didn't often see. The Grand Heaven Master had only spoken a few short sentences, and yet had come off sounding incredibly impressive. Even as Bai Xiaochun pondered the subject, the Grand Heaven Master broke the silence. "Sometimes I really have to admire that celestial on Heavenspan Island. I really don't measure up to him." With that, he looked over at Bai Xiaochun. "So among the group just now, who do you think are the ones loyal to the Imperial clan?" 1. At this point I would like to explain something that confused me at first. Chen Haosong bears the same surname as the Chen clan that Bai Xiaochun just cleaned out. However, Chen Haosong is not a member of that Chen clan. He has his own Duke-level Chen clan, a point which is made more clear later on in the story. For now, I think it makes things a bit easier to understand to point out that he is not connected to the Marquis-level Chen clan. Bai Xiaochun didn't even blink a single time in response to the Grand Heaven Master's question. Considering how serious the man was acting, he unhesitatingly said, "Grand Heaven Master, I'd say there's a high likelihood that all of them are loyal to the Imperial clan. And especially Chen Haosong. That bastard is definitely on the side of the Arch-Emperor." Bai Xiaochun was still angry at how much Chen Haosong seemed to want to kill him, and figured this was the perfect opportunity to do something about it. Clearing his throat slightly, the Grand Heaven Master said, "Oh? Do you have any proof?" "Proof? Of course. Just moments ago, Chen Haosong clearly wanted to kill me. Grand Heaven Master, you personally appointed me as the Inspections Commissioner, and I'm completely and utterly loyal to you. The fact that he actually wants to kill me does a lot to show what he's thinking. Grand Heaven Master, why don't we just get rid of them all?" The Grand Heaven Master looked at Bai Xiaochun out of the corner of his eyes. He knew of the petty differences between Chen Haosong and Bai Xiaochun, and also knew what type of person Bai Xiaochun was. Therefore, he simply ignored his urgings, and looked thoughtfully toward the depths of the Imperial Palace. When Bai Xiaochun realized that the Grand Heaven Master was ignoring him, he sighed inwardly at how indecisive the man was. When you had to kill, it needed to be done without hesitation. "If I were him," he murmured to himself, "I would definitely kill Chen Haosong immediately. There's no reason to be so wishy-washy about it." After a bit more time passed, Bai Xiaochun realized that the Grand Heaven Master was still ignoring him, and seemed lost in thought. Therefore, Bai Xiaochun decided to temporarily forget about what had just happened outside. As he did, he began to ponder other matters, such as all of the wealth he had plundered from the Li and Chen clans. That was when he started wondering if the Grand Heaven Master was being like the giant Ghost King, and waiting to get his split. Grand Heaven Master, the Li and Chen clans were swimming in wealth. "I got a lot of treasure from them, a shocking amount really. I can't believe some measly heavenly marquises actually had so much money. Obviously, they were well connected to the Arch-Emperor." His testing words had absolutely no effect whatsoever. The Grand Heaven Master still seemed lost in thought, leading Bai Xiaochun to wonder what he was thinking about. After a moment of hesitation, he said, "Grand Heaven Master, I'll send some people over right away to deliver all of the confiscated treasure." However, the Grand Heaven Master still didn't respond. By now, Bai Xiaochun was starting to feel a lot of pressure, and started to wonder if the Grand Heaven Master suspected him of having taken some things for himself during the shakedowns. Clearing his throat, he said, Grand Heaven Master, I just remembered that the Li clan had a sort of spirit mountain." Shockingly, though, the Grand Heaven Master continued to ignore him. Scowling on the verge of tears, Bai Xiaochun said, "Grand Heaven Master, I just recalled that the Chen clan had a piece of spirit jade." It was around this time that the Grand Heaven Master finally looked back at Bai Xiaochun, although he didn't seem to be focusing his eyes, as though he were still staring into space. It almost made it seem like he was privy to all of the secrets in the world, a thought that caused Bai Xiaochun's heart to start thumping. Grand Heaven Master, it just occurred to me that there was a big batch of soul medicine in the Li clan. As his words trailed off, the Grand Heaven Master suddenly spoke in his hoarse voice. Do you know what is the most difficult thing to understand, Bai Hao? With that, his eyes came into focus, and he turned to look off into the distance. His words had Bai Xiaochun feeling more nervous than ever as he tried to determine the meaning of them. Could he be suspecting that Bai Xiaochun had actually embezzled more than what he had just admitted to? In his unease, he even contemplated whether or not he should hand over the rainbow spirit thistle from the Li clan. It was actually very irritating that the Grand Heaven Master was being so stingy. He hadn't embezzled that much, and yet the man kept digging away at him. Even as he stood there trying to decide what to do, the Grand Heaven Master continued. The hearts of men. Nothing in the world is more difficult to understand. Wouldn't you agree, Bai Hao? There seemed to be some strange power at work within those words. As soon as they entered Bai Xiaochun's ears, he felt like crying. He almost couldn't believe that the Grand Heaven Master was being even more stingy than the giant Ghost King. After all, Bai Xiaochun had done all the work, and yet, the Grand Heaven Master was taking all the rewards. Not daring to hide anything else, he quickly said, Grand Heaven Master, it turns out my memory is a bit bad. I just now realized that the Li clan actually had a stock of. However, before he could finish, the Grand Heaven Master interrupted him, his voice hoarse and his pupils as black as night. The hearts of men are unfathomable. And not just the nobility and aristocracy of the Arch-Emperor dynasty, or the Arch-Emperor himself. I am the same. You know, if it hadn't been for me, when the Arch-Emperor failed to step into the demigod realm all those years ago, the Arch-Emperor dynasty would have fallen apart. I cowed the 4 heavenly kings, and I kept the dynasty in one piece. I repelled the invading forces from the Heavenspan River. You know, sometimes I think I should follow the example of the Celestial from Heavenspan Island, and just completely eradicate my enemies. Remove the sun and the moon, and leave the sky open and clear. As these words left his mouth, he straightened up. He was no longer stooped, but rather, stood tall and straight. He pulsed with an energy that was difficult to put into words, and seemed like a completely different person than before. Rumbling sounds filled heaven and earth, and even the light of the sun and moon seemed to fade. All of a sudden, the Grand Heaven Master didn't seem at all like an old man to Bai Xiaochun. He seemed like a giant who could prop up the heavens, as though a single thought on his part could cause the sun and moon to perish, and cast all heaven and earth into darkness. The energy was so intense that Bai Xiaochun was forced to take a few steps backward, his heart pounding the entire time. However, the effect only lasted for a moment before the Grand Heaven Master stooped back down, bowed his head, and sighed. The sky returned to normal, and all heaven and earth went still. However, Bai Xiaochun's heart was still racing, and he was panting. At this point, the Grand Heaven Master turned to look at him. What did you just say? The Li clan had a stock of what? Bai Xiaochun stared back at him in mute shock, proverbial tears welling up in him. At this point, he realized that he had misjudged the situation. The Grand Heaven Master didn't care at all about the wealth which had been confiscated during the shakedowns. He had been sighing and thinking, not about the treasure, but rather, about his personal issues. Furthermore, the words he had spoken had never had anything to do with the confiscated wealth. Bai Xiaochun swallowed hard as he raced to come up with an idea of how to make sure he could keep everything he had earned during the shakedowns. To have the Grand Heaven Master's gaze leveled on him caused beads of sweat to appear on his forehead as he nervously said, What was it the Li clan had? That doesn't matter. Grand Heaven Master, you are completely right that the hearts of men are unfathomable. However, that's not important. In fact, it doesn't really matter whether or not people are loyal to you, or to the Arch-Emperor. At first, what he said didn't make much sense even to himself. However, as the words left his mouth, an idea began to form more clearly in his mind, and he continued, the most important thing is what they will do if both you and the Arch-Emperor are present at the same time. Who cares if Chen Haosong and the others are actually loyal to the Arch-Emperor? Which of them will actually admit that openly? Even if all of the nobility and aristocracy in the entire Arch-Emperor dynasty are loyal to the Arch-Emperor, why does that matter? None of them would ever dare to admit to that in your presence. That goes to show that you have them under your thumb. The more he spoke, the more everything made sense, and the more excited he looked. Grand Heaven Master, perhaps you can't force everyone to be loyal to you, nor can you determine for sure who is disloyal. However, what you can do, sir, is make everyone fear you. Grand Heaven Master, your loyal servant is of the opinion that you don't need to try to figure out who is loyal to whom. You just need to figure out who they fear the most. In the end, he was talking so loudly that he was almost yelling. At the same time, the Grand Heaven Master's eyes slowly began to narrow in thought. That in turn caused Bai Xiaochun to feel very proud of his words. Not only did they sound wonderful, they were actually packed with many levels of truth. Considering that the Grand Heaven Master was now thinking seriously about his words, Bai Xiaochun couldn't help but sigh at how unparalleled he was under heaven. In order to protect that medicinal plant from the Li clan, he thought, and also care, I have to go for broke. Clearing his throat, and feeling like the picture of outstanding righteousness, he struck while the iron was hot. Grand Heaven Master, your humble servant has a plan. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.